Hi, this is Tim Freund with Dilbeck Estates and Christie's International Real Estate in Westlake Village, California. Woof! Thanks for tuning into the podcast. Thank you so much. I really appreciate it. I hope you guys got something out of episodes 1 and 2 on our program for first-time buyers. Today, we're going to talk about things to look for in your home. So this is really just going to be kind of an overview of things that are important. So for those of you who have never purchased a home before or really had much of a conversation with anybody about purchasing a home, the three most important words in real estate are location, location, and location. I know it's a cliche, right? Your location, 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 right? But what does that mean? Well, the way I've always sort of looked at it is location number one is where are you moving? What city? What town? And how do you determine what town? Obviously, proximity to work is a big deal, access to the types of things you're looking for in terms of entertainment, in terms of shopping, in terms of houses to worship, in terms of schools, in terms of freeway access and public transportation. There's a whole lot of stuff within a given city that you're going to be looking for, but first and foremost is the town that you're going to be buying in. The second important location is the neighborhood. What are the characteristics of the neighborhood? Where is it located? I once had a postal carrier tell me that the most expensive neighborhoods don't have straight streets. I thought that was really interesting. I don't know if that's really true, but I thought that was a really interesting way for someone to look at locations, and there's a lot of truth to that, right? I mean, you start talking about hillsides and canyons and this type of stuff, and we don't have straight streets. So that was kind of interesting. I suppose people on Fifth Avenue might disagree in New York, but anyway. So the neighborhood that you're buying in is super important, okay? And the next thing that you want to really consider is the location in the town, in the neighborhood, and in that neighborhood specifically. And this is really where I'm going to tend to focus a little bit of this talk on, because the thing that you want to keep in mind is that while you're buying this home today, this may not be the last home you purchase. And listen, wealth is built by not selling real estate and holding on to your assets, collecting them, as it were, and you may never sell your home. And I hope for your sake that you build an entire empire based on the real estate that you purchase. So anyway, a couple things about that location, in particular the specific lot. So when I'm showing property, and this, by the way, for you out there who haven't concluded you even need to have somebody like me to assist you, I want to assure you it's a great idea, not just because that's how I make my living, but of course that is how I make my living, but because you're going to want to have somebody else looking out for your best interest. I mean, picture anything you're doing, hunting or cycling, or you always want to have another set of eyes participating in the process of whatever you're doing. And so with home buying, that's one of the jobs the realtor is going to have. And I'm going to talk about this in a subsequent episode about how do you choose a realtor, but just bear that in mind, because I'm going to be giving you some really good, helpful information here, but I want you to know that, listen, you really want to probably have a professional on your side. Well, not want to, you definitely want to have a professional on your side. Okay, so what do we look for? Well, obviously the first thing about that last location is what surrounds that home, right? Are you in a neighborhood, is it a single family home, let's just say for a second, and are you in a neighborhood where there's graffiti? Are you in a neighborhood where there's bars on the windows? Are you in a neighborhood where there's trash on the side, or where you're not too far from a homeless encampment? Those are things that, while those may not be in effect in the future, they very well could be in the future. And while you're not intending to ever sell the property, you certainly want to be aware of the environment that you're purchasing in, because obviously for resale purposes, your buyer is going to be looking at the same stuff. So, be aware of your surroundings. What's behind the property? Does it back up to another home? Does it back up to a wash? Is it backing up to a 7-Eleven? Does it back up to a school? Is it near a railroad track? Is there a bus stop in front of it? Are you on a busy street? Are you on a major thoroughfare? Are you on a street that dead ends and gets a lot of unsavory things happening after dark? So these are all things you want to keep in mind. And I know that may seem obvious, but in the excitement, I can't tell you how many times we've gone to a really beautiful home and my clients are just, wow, this is great. I can think of one in particular where my clients, the house had been remodeled by the owner, not a flipper, so it was a really nice remodeled home. It was at the end of a cul-de-sac in a super desirable neighborhood, but the home backed up to a major road. Now, it was lower, and you will find that when homes are lower on a property, that it actually is a little bit quieter than, say, higher up, because sound tends to rise. It also travels on the wind. That's a little known fact that people aren't aware of. So you may not hear the road noise today, but if the wind's blowing from the east, for example, and that's the direction of the road noise, you're going to hear it screaming the next day. So it's just something to keep in mind. Again, something that your professional is going to be able to assist you with in those types of observations. But it backed up to this road. And so, I emphasized with them on multiple occasions that they needed to really think about that. They needed to consider that. Now, I sold them this home probably 7 years ago, and they're still in that home. So you're not always selling. And it's a great home. Their daughter rides her bike on the cul-de-sac. It had the right room count. It had a gorgeous, great big kitchen. I mean, there was just a lot of nice things about it. And they had to make a decision based on the price that they were willing to accept the location. So what's behind you is super important if it's a road or something. Because here's the thing. When you go to sell, your buyer, they're going to be looking at the same thing. And oftentimes you may not have remodeled by the time you're going to sell. So now your home that you bought has deteriorated. You've lived in it for however many years, and, maybe it needs paint, maybe it needs carpet, maybe the styles have changed, and so it looks dated. I mean, it doesn't take that long for this kind of thing to happen. In fact, I can show you scores of dining rooms that were painted blood red that were from the early 2000s because that was the style, and people had these dark red dining rooms, and you go, at the time, it was like, wow, that's really cool, Tuscan, kind of cool dark room, and now you go in and you go, oh my God, this house was built or painted in the early 2000s. So anyway, so styles change, and if you're not going to be remodeling and you go to sell and you've also got this other factor because you're backing up to the school or you're backing up to the road, you might have to discount your price some to sell it, which brings you around to, well, how do you buy a home like that? How do you buy a home that has an issue? And I'll come to that in a sec, but there are strategies. There's other things that you want to consider besides just the physical location. Is it backing any of these things? Because all those things, of course, are going to negatively affect your value. They're going to negatively affect your appreciation. You won't appreciate as much, and it's going to have to be taken into consideration when you go to sell. What about things like death on property? More and more our parents, our grandparents, our great-grandparents are deciding that they want to age in place, and they may well die in place. And you have to ask yourself, well, A, are you comfortable with that? And why wouldn't you be? I mean, this is what happens. But you need to consider that because a death is required to be disclosed for 3 years. So that's an important thing. But what if it's not a natural occurrence? You okay with that too? So those are things you want to consider because they are going to affect the value and desirability of the property. And we have a saying in our paperwork, the value or desirability of the property not known to or within the diligent intention and observation of the parties. That's a seller's duty to disclose to a buyer. And if you own that property and you're the seller, you have to disclose that someone died in that home for 3 years. So if you're selling in less than 3 years, that's something you would have to disclose. If it's, 15 years ago, you may never know. However, if there is a stigma involved, somebody, took their own life, or there was, a murder on the property, or, something like that. I mean, imagine you were going to go by OJ's house or go by the Manson murder house. It might be something that you're going to be interested in, 60 years later, right? That's why they tore OJ's house down. It was in Brentwood. It was a really high-end property. They bulldozed it because they didn't want the house there anymore with the stigma of the murders. So, because it was just so negatively affecting the value and desirability of the property. So these are things that you have to keep in mind, questions that you need to ask, your realtor needs to ask. So that's all, location stuff that you want to take into account. And the way you negotiate location is you have to try and buy it at the right price. If you're buying a home that backs up to a busy road, okay, you've made that decision like my clients did. It's got value and desirability, but you have to buy it at the right price, because if you overpay on something where you've got a negative like that, it's the same as some other home in the neighborhood, then you know what? Go buy the other home, because you're going to get hammered when you go to sell it. So that's part of the strategy, and again, why you need to have a professional to help you. Floor plan, that's something to consider. Is it a 2-bedroom? Is it a 3-bedroom? Is it a 2-bath? Is it a 2.5 bath? Obviously, the more of those elements you have, the higher the price goes, right? 4-bath home is usually a lot more expensive than a 3-bath home. An appraiser will attribute a value of a bathroom anywhere from a half bath to $15,000 to a whole bath at $25,000. But it can be bigger. So, you want to make sure that the floor plan, if it's a home that's been added onto, that the floor plan makes sense. It's not kind of weird and funky. Because if it's weird and funky, that's okay. It may work for you. But you got to pay the right price for it, because if it's funky and you go to sell it in 5 years, it's funky then too. So, again, you need to make sure you're buying right. What else? You want to investigate things like insurability. Make sure you can get insurance. If it backs up to an open space, you might be super psyched because it's private and you love it. You love looking out at the field. Well, of course, if that field is a risk of fire, then it may negatively affect your ability to insure the property, or it may cost a lot more, and that in turn can affect you when you go to sell the home. So you got to consider that. Is it worth it? Yeah, probably, but you want to consider that. How important are schools? Okay, you don't have kids. You're just starting out. This is the first-time buyer podcast. So you don't have any kids. So do you want to look at the schools? Yeah, sure. That's a data point, right? I mean, it may not affect you, so it may not be a top priority item. And nor should it be. I mean, if you don't have kids, it's not a priority item. But you do want to at least take the time and look at the schools to determine what's going on there, because that could also tell you about other things in the neighborhood. If it's not scoring well, why isn't it scoring well? Is it because, it's just sort of a mixed neighborhood? Is it because, the school district doesn't have good funding? I mean, I don't know. There's just things you want to look at, because, schools are important. And when you go to sell, somebody else is going to look at that property. If you're looking at a condo or a townhome, one of the things you need to look at is association dues. Condos are great. Low maintenance, they're cool, especially if you don't have kids, easy to clean. I mean, they can be in great locations, walkability to your shops and restaurants and stuff. But you got to look at the reserves, and you got to look at their dues, because if the dues are $500 a month today, well, you can bet that in 5 years they're going to be a little bit higher. And, you start to get to a point with dues where, you're talking about buying power of equivalent to $100,000. I mean, a $500 payment is over $100,000 in purchase power. That's a lot of in today's interest rates. That's a lot of purchase power. So, you want to look at that. And when you're looking at those dues, you got to look at the documents that come along with the HOA, or the rules that are going to prohibit you. Things you want to consider. Are there rules? I mean, are you the type of person that's going to have a lot of parties? Well, you may want to rethink that big building type of environment. So anyway, those are all things related to condos that can be super important in terms of that. So the main point I want to get across here, and I'm going to wrap it up, there's a lot more to talk about. So you can always reach out to me, DM me, and I'm happy to go over this with you some more, and hopefully, of course, help you to purchase that home when the time comes. But the main thing you want to look at is location, location, location is still the mantra that rules the day in real estate. You want to buy a good location. If you buy a good location, you're going to be able to sell that good location in a down market. And property values do go down. Just as they go up in California, they tend to go up more than they go down year in and year out. That's been the trend since, the Spanish land grants, as far as I'm able to tell. So you definitely need to make sure that you're paying attention to location, pay attention to the features of the home that are non-negotiables. You can't change certain elements about a home, the way the home is laid out, and look at look at hiring a good realtor. So we're going to talk about that next. Thanks so much for listening. I'm Tim Freund with Dilbeck Estates and Christie's International Real Estate. DM me, call me, text me, send up a smoke signal. I'm here for you. Let me know if I can help you. All right, thanks.